Hi there, my name is Ben Toms. I'm the Head of Innovation and Platform at DataJar. You might also know me as Manuel. Now today I'm here to talk to you about managing iPads for the Mac admin. So the premise of this talk is, imagine if you're a Mac admin who's been using Jamf for a number of years and you've been tasked with managing iPads. It's the same, right? Well, wrong. There's a few things that are going to catch you out. There are a few sharp edges and quite a few differences between managing iPads and macOS devices. We're going to go through these in several different sections. First of all, we'll talk about Apple deployment programs, Jamf Pro Settings, application deployment and configuration, automated device enrollment, device management settings, remote commands, and some additional tips. Now, throughout the talk, I'm going to link to various bits of documentation, etc., that are kind of citing the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, or backing me up on what I'm saying. And bearing in mind this is a 30-minute talk, I have an English accent, I have a bit of a cold, we've got 100 slides to run through. So don't worry about taking the links down. This will be shown at the very end. And maybe if you play it back, if you find the accent a bit strong, maybe slow it down for playback. Anyway, here we go. So we're looking at Apple deployment programs as the first step here. If you might be able to get away with them without having them to a point with macOS, but with mobile devices, it's not going to be feasible. You need to have them up and running. And if you've got them up and running, you've got your apps in VPP, and you've got your devices being purchased from a reseller that are adding them via ADE, then you're kind of most of the way there. However, there is some interesting other additions that you might want to look at depending on what you're going to be doing with these devices. So if you're looking at kind of using the shared iPad scenario with Apple Classroom, etc., you might want to take your Apple School Manager instance, integrate it with Azure AD, and also within your SIM sys system. And this will be taking an SFTP export, or CSV export, sorry, from your SIM or sys system and importing that to Apple Classroom via SFTP. One of the things that's going to be a challenge here is the fact that your UPN needs to match your email. And if you're a single school, that might be easy enough. But if you're part of a multi-academy trust, a K-12 district, or something that applies to business as well, business, you might find that your central organization has UPNs in a certain way, and maybe across the org you've got UPNs in a certain way, but your emails are different. If they're all set up and good to go and everything seems happy, you can then connect this into Jamf Pro. Now, Jamf Pro itself will not just take the source from ASM, it also needs to look at AD, LDAP, etc. as well. And again, we need to reference these details, make sure these link. So there's a few criteria here, a few steps that might need to be done in advance before you even get your hands on a device. Similarly, for business, you can do the same thing. So use Azure AD for federation. That will create you'll manage Apple IDs, create your accounts, you hook that up into Jamf Pro, but Jamf Pro again needs to look at another source to reference the data. Apple have documented about the UPN needing to match the email in a couple of links. Here's one for School Manager, here's one for Business Manager, but again, remember there's going to be a link of all the links coming at the end. And 2 years ago, I gave a talk at Macaduck about modern deployment workflows for education, where I spent a bit more time, went in a bit more detail about that with the just-in-time provisioning, etc. There's also a company here called Salamander Software. Now, a few of our customers use them and have some great tools and some free utilities even that will take the SIMS sys data, import that into Apple School Manager for you, as well as Azure, etc. And they've got some paid-for stuff, but could be quite helpful for this path for you. With all that in place, you also need to go to your Jamf Pro instance, go into Settings, Global Management, and there's Apple Education Support. We need to enable this within there. One of the things within this, you can also set up images, and images will show on the devices when someone logs in, and we're going to show you examples of a shared iPad down the line. But this will be something that you host yourself, but you can use variables, as you've seen here, $username, etc., to make sure that the image is pointing for the right student. If you try and enable this and you've got Apple Business Manager, you check the box in the second tab here, nothing will happen. This is what will happen if you've got an Apple School Manager instance. So here it advises you when it's going to sync. Obviously, you want the sync to happen after your import from your SIM sys system. And at the bottom there, we've got the example there of the matching criteria, where Jamf Pro, via LDAP, etc., is using the email address to match against the email address within the managed Apple ID. Quite convoluted, but you'll get there. It just needs a bit of thought put behind it. Next, we're looking at other Jamf Pro settings. Now, this is more of a FYI type thing, but this has caught us out. If we look at re-enrollment, if you have all these options checked, and you also have checked within Update Inventory, the collects user and location information, you might find that devices won't be able to update their inventory. So you get into a bit of an issue here. What you need to do is either uncheck one of those re-enrollment settings or uncheck collect user and location information from LDAP within your mobile device inventory settings. I know it's a bit of a mouthful. And then after which you need to re-enroll any devices that were enrolled with all those settings enabled. So it can be somewhat problematic, especially when there's an actual issue there. But just an FYI on this one. Within Jamf Pro again, we're looking at settings and device management. So of course, these are going to be very applicable. A few things to notice here. This is the inventory collection tab. So inventory collection, essentially your recon. What options do we have here? Well, we only have every day, every week, every month. They're not going to run in of a policy, etc., as what they do with macOS. This is something that you're going to need to get used to. It's a slightly different headspace for this. We've also got options here about collecting unmanaged apps. These are apps that aren't deployed via MDM. So some considerations here are, if you're allowing people to manage their own devices to a point, do you want to know what other apps they've got installed? Because you might know about dating apps, political affiliation apps, I'm not sure, but there might be some privacy concerns there. Alternatively, it might well be that actually you want to crowdsource the top device apps that are being used by people that you're not deploying. Also, if you're just trying to lock everything down, you might want to collect this in case there are any apps that suddenly sneak through. And next, there's that option there about the collect user location information from LDAP that we spoke about a moment ago. And that works the same as what it does for macOS. If you look at mobile device extension attributes, one quick thing to point out here, no scripts. Mobile devices, no scripts. So those workflows are going to be slightly different. And one of the next options here is app maintenance. So app maintenance, this is when Jamf Pro goes out to VPP, updates all of its records for the VPP apps you've got, and then goes through to look at what devices it needs to deploy to and how it's going to deploy it. One note on this, if you're pushing out app updates to devices and they're locked, you're going to get a notification here saying device was busy. If you look at the MDM spec, I believe it says not now. So the device needs to be unlocked, which again is a slightly different mechanism, a slightly different requirement there than macOS. If someone's got the app open while you're trying to force an update as well, they're going to get a problem like this. What should be in the quotes there should be the MDM URL. It says is about to update the app. If someone clicks cancel, they'll get the prompt again in a few minutes. If they click update, the app's closed, VPP updates the app, and then they can go and reopen the app. If we look under self-service, this might be stuff that you set a while ago, but there's still some things that are pertinent to iOS, iPadOS, etc. that we want to look at. So first of all, we've got the iOS section. Depending on the age of your device, of your Jamf Pro instance, this installation method might be set to automatically install. So we want to change this to manual install, and I'm going to give you an example of how to do the manual install in a moment. If you don't do this, what will happen is someone's iPad will get this notification. Again, within the quotes, there should be the MDM URL, but basically it's going to ask them to log into their iTunes account in order to install self-service. There's another option here at the end of the iOS side of self-service, which is allow users to log into the login menu. This depends on a workflow option. So if there's something you're doing on macOS, you might want to mirror it, but there's also a workflow, which I'm going to show in a sec, where this is actually needed. For branding, you might already have branding set up for macOS, so this is something similar you can set up for iOS, and it has a similar look and feel to the screen. One thing to mention, the icon itself only shows within the app, and that shows just above the icon section, and I've called it out here. So the icon displays only in the login screen and only in the header. It doesn't change the icon of the app on the device. And last, almost last, bookmarks. Bookmarks aren't available for iOS. We can use web clips. We're going to give an example of that down the line. So if there's one thing you use heavily, you're going to need to transition into web clips for your iOS, iPadOS devices. And next we've got app requests. Now app requests only works on iPadOS. And it's a workflow whereby certain people within a static user group can request an application. I'm going to show you this and talk about this as well. So you need to have self-service on a device, and they need to log in with their account. And this can be obviously SSO'd, etc. as needed. And remember, these people need to be on a static user group that you've then approved that they can make the requests. When the person's managed to log in, which will happen in a sec, so within here, they can do a search. And this will search applications that are already available via MDM through Jamf Pro, or applications that are available in the App Store. And in here, they can click the request button. You can add up to 5 fields in this section here. So it could be cost center, etc., manager's name, etc. But you can put some stuff in here. And when they're ready, they can hit the submit button. And the submit, this will send an email through to an email address or email addresses you've specified with the responses to these text fields, as well as a link to the application itself, etc. So it could be handy at the beginning of your rollout as well. So let's look at application configuration and deployment. So if we look here at self-service, this is probably one of the first apps you're going to deploy. You purchase this through VPP, etc., as you would do normally, within the location that's added to Jamf Pro. And if you've done VPP stuff before, this should look very familiar to you. There are a few differences, we're going to point them out. One of the first things here, though, to say about if anything's grayed out like this is because we talked about the app maintenance a moment ago, and you've set that across your instance. So this is being overridden globally. You could instead have this set per app, but that's going to be a faff. And then we've got some more options here about making the app management possible, which is quite a big feature and something we're going to go into in a sec. But there's also a button here for force app update. So whilst you've got all your apps should be updating every night, if there's an immediate update you need to do, or there's loads of devices missing maybe, click that force app update button. It will just update that one app. The previous button that we saw that said the same was updating all your apps. Let's look at managed. So managed apps have the following restrictions and capabilities, providing improved security and better user experience. Managed open-in is a way of kind of looking at DLP in regards to your mobile devices. So you can set it to only allow documents from unmanaged sources in managed destinations. Maybe you allow people to add their own email account, personal email account to their device. Do you want them to save attachments from that into maybe your OneDrive, your Google Drive, etc., or other apps? Vice versa, do you want someone to be able to take data from those Google Drives, those OneDrives, and copy them and send them off an email? These are things that you can look at, but it requires the app to be deployed via VPP and have the option enabled within there as well. One thing to be bearing in mind here, whilst this is Jamf Now KB and whilst this is iOS 12, we're still seeing these issues on iPadOS and iOS as well. When you get a new device out of the box, it will have the iWork apps, as they were called, Pages, Keynote, Numbers, and GarageBand. If you try and deploy them via VPP, the managed flag doesn't work, and instead when the user loads the app, they're going to be asked for their Apple ID to buy them from the store. The only fix for this is to fully wipe the device, and then you deploy those apps via VPP. Some of the other options we had available there was about backing up the apps as well. So again, something to be mindful of. So if you choose the backup, prevent backup of the app data option, obviously there's no backup. Well, it makes sense for some apps that basically pull their data from a website, etc., and the local copy doesn't really matter. However, if you check the box that says remove app when NDM profile is removed, users can back up the data for the app, but they can restore the data only to the same device. So if someone's got a device for the lifetime of them being with your organization, that might be fine. But as soon as you start changing devices, they're going to start having problems with their backups being restored to devices. And if you say choose neither, then people can restore backups for the app data to new devices and current devices. There's also consideration here around restoring devices that are supervised, because when you restore a device that's supervised, the supervision identity actually gets restored as well, which can cause a number of issues. So basically, if you're moving MDMs or you've made changes to your pre-stage enrollments, what you really need to do is to have people swap devices. And if you're moving MDMs, just get a load of people in a room, swap with the person on your left, etc. Whatever you do, just swap devices. The restores should then work, the supervision record will not be deployed, and the stuff should enroll. So again, it's worth looking at your workflows and what you're doing here. We can also mark apps as non-removable. This in itself is great. You can make sure that certain applications that you need stay on the device at all times, but again, it can actually confuse another workflow, which we're going to look at in a sec. We're not going to look at the scoping tab within self-service for this app, because it's the same as policies, same as config profile, same as macOS VPP. But we look at managed distribution. If you're not used to VPP, you're going to get this wrong 5 times, 6 times, whatever. Go to managed distribution, check the box, set the license for the location you've got. Otherwise, what you'll again see on devices, you can see in the command history, being asked to log into iTunes, and again, they're going to get that prompt because they're going to be asked to install the app, but no license is going to be assigned. Last tab here, this is something that only happens with the mobile device side, which is app configuration. Now, app configuration, you need a managed app again, and it's a way of developers being able to have settings to push down to devices to configure them. Way back in JNUC 2016, myself and James spoke about this in our talk, Profiles and IT Admin's Best Friend. On disk, if you look at it, basically you've got the app there, and within the sandbox of the app, there's a library preferences folder, and the app config sits within a plist within there. Very similar to what we used to with macOS. This is a whole community that backs this, that Jamf are one of the founders of. And there's a nice summary about capabilities and best practices, etc., of what your app should do. So if your vendor doesn't support this, you should point them to the app config site and all these items here as well. This is something that everybody should be doing because it's available in iOS 7. As an example, Jamf Pro have the config needed for self-service within their administrator guide. You just copy and paste that in there. And you can see in there again, we've got variables, $serial number, $device name, $JPS URL to auto-configure the app. If we look here, this is self-service, it's auto-configured. We had a sneak peek earlier with the branding, etc. But here we go. You load up the app, you've got your PPC, and you need to acknowledge that there. App's configured, it's pointing to your instance, it has all the details it needs to set the branding. If you don't do this and deploy self-service alone, they're going to launch the app, it's going to be like this. Basically, it needs to be configured. It doesn't know what to do. Okay, so let's look at automated device enrollment. Now with iPadOS or iPad, iPhone, Apple TV, iPod, etc., there's been a thing for a number of years where you can actually add a device to your ADE via configurator. And there's a link here to the Apple documentation, as well as Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Over at Jamf did a great blog about how you can add this within Jamf from the workflow. So that brings them into your instance, and that can be quite handy. There's details around age of the iOS, etc., that you need within those respective blogs and links. When you look at a pre-stage enrollment, if you've done pre-stage enrollments before, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be very similar here, and there's some stuff that's going to be quite different. Before we proceed, there was an option here to say require credentials for enrollment. This is something we should be doing anyway, regardless of how the devices are going to be configured, etc., where they go. This is a paper here from Duo. It's 2018. It's still worth referencing. And basically it outlines all the reasons why you should increase security of your DEP workflows, or it was DEP then, ADE now, by setting enrollment authentication on there. And now with enrollment customization, etc., we can add single sign-on, multi-factor auth, etc. as well. Now, one of the cool things within here, we got shared iPad. And shared iPad is something we're going to show in a sec. But another example here where we check one box, it actually enables the other, which is the activation lock. A details of activation locks within pre-stage, etc. works is again detailed within the administrator guide. So this is a device that we're enrolling and calling out specifically some things in here for iPad specific and shared device specific as well. So some of this should be quite familiar, even the macOS stuff. One thing on here, you have to activate online with a mobile device. So here we're entering an email address, but also below the SSIDs, there was an option there to connect to a Mac or PC, so you can tether. You can see at the bottom of the screen there. So you have to activate. You cannot do these offline, and that means that they have to enroll within your ADE stuff. Whereas on macOS, I know folks can skip it if you don't go online. So this is quite nice, and I hope that this comes to macOS Mac devices soon. So here we are, we're activating as per what we might have seen before. In the usual remote management screen, yep, we want to be managed. Still haven't got an option. Install the configuration, so waiting the config. And next thing it's going to say is something along the lines of setting up final shared device. This kind of happens then really quickly. There we go. Good timing on the click. It restarts. And this is quite different to what you would see normally. But this is an example of where if you've got a device that you've set up normally and you want to use shared iPad, you have to reprovision the device. With shared iPad enabled, we can actually authenticate with the device here at the Apple ID screen with a managed Apple ID that exists within our ABM ASM instance. Here I am logging in. Now, if you're using Azure AD, you would have your Apple ID first, Azure AD off now, and then passcode here as well. And because I've got two-step verification involved on this account, this is where I would need to type in my my two-step verification password, OTP. You might have seen a moment ago as well what came up on the big screen. On the screen, there was a big circle with BT on there, which is my initials, obviously. Now, if you had the images being imported, as we saw before with Apple Education Support, that would show the student's image as well. Should be great for early years students, where an easy way for them to visually identify which iPad is theirs. So I'm authenticating. I'll be logging in a sec. Now within here, this isn't particularly remarkable. It looks like a normal iPad. Top left, you can see my name. But generally, not much here that's going to be any different. If we then look in the settings app in a sec. Again, there's not much different here. There are some changes, but not a huge amount. The main thing that's going to be pertinent here is if we look with it at the top, we click on the account. The account's already there. It's already signed into Apple services. And if we click on the iCloud and press iCloud, we will then see that we're already using storage. And this is because with shared iPad, you're going to be actually saving your stuff to iCloud as part of the process. We log out. If I log out here, if I look in the screen, clicking log out, it's shown at the bottom of the screen, saving documents, which is that Delta sync with iCloud. Now I've logged out. Again, initial, we could have an image here if it was Apple School Manager. Bottom left, you can other people can log in, and then we've got a guest login. Click guest, it advises you your data will not be saved after log out, and you can still proceed and log in. Nothing much changed here. Guest top left. However, you can't sign into Apple services with this, or the iCloud services. And when you log out, you're again once more advised that actually your data is not going to be saved. Okay. So with this, Apple strongly state that basically shared iPad is extremely important. Imagine if you've got multiple people, multiple devices, they're logging in, they're logging out, the data is going to go straight to Apple's iCloud. If you're caching, and especially the option there to cache iCloud data, this will then just work locally. Also, again, if you've got a load of iPads in a classroom, the idea would be that a student would pick up an iPad with their name on it, either the initial or the picture. And then that means that there'd be a smaller delta in regards to what data they're pulling backwards and forwards. If you like to look at managed Apple IDs, it's worth investigating the documentation relevant for Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager. There are limitations, and it is different. There are also global stuff that you can amend and change. If we look at another thing within pre-stage enrollments, we've also got mobile device names, and within there you've got several options. One is the default names that comes in as iPad, iPod, etc. List of names, and these are in the enrollment order. And if you unenroll a device and re-enroll it, it will then be the next order. So enrollment 1, enrollment 2, enrollment 3, enrollment 4, regardless if the device is being re-enrolled. And serial numbers. The other thing here as well to mention here is you check the box here that says enforce mobile device names. This actually gets written to the device record as well. So this is one of the fun things where you allow people to rename the devices, but you check that box. Every time an inventory update happens, the name will be reset per what Jamf has. The only way to uncheck this box here currently, there's no API endpoint, so you have to go and do it manually. This is another consideration of your workflow. It's kind of get it right first, or at least think about it before you cause yourself an issue. You don't want to manually go through and unchecking this box and clicking save on hundreds of devices. Now let's look at device management settings. So we spoke a bit earlier about the managed stuff. This is where the restrictions profile, and most of these sections are. And this kind of gives you more information. So you make sure the apps are decreed as managed. And then from in here, this can set a bit more about what you allow, what's unmanaged, what is managed, can you allow airdrop, etc. So it gives you a few different ways of managing the workflow even more. At the top there, shared iPad device temporary session. If you restrict this, that's why the guest button disappears from shared iPad. So just remember that here. You could think you've set it up and then it disappears. And the second section here is all about application delivery. One thing to mention, you don't need the App Store to be visible if you're deploying apps via VPP. You can allow folks to remove apps, but if you set the app to not be removable, they can't remove that app. So again, it's just something to bear in mind. And removing system apps. People can remove the various system apps that are on their device. Apple have got a KB on this. The fun thing is if they want to restore the device, they need an App Store. So you need to think about this again, have a workflow there. If you remove the App Store but allow people to remove the built-in apps, if they remove the app and they want to restore it, they need the App Store back. So it's a bit of here, there. I'm trying to figure out the best workflow for you. Now, screen time. If you're a parent with children with devices, please look at this. It's amazing. But also, if you're from an MDM point of view, from an admin point of view, it can be a pain because there can be some conflicts here. In regards to some of the things that you could set content privacy restrictions, you can restrict applications themselves as well. So this might be that something you decide just to disable as well. But if you're a parent, it's great, and I would recommend it. Another thing here is USB restricted mode. This came about with iOS 11.4. And basically, if a device isn't unlocked and you haven't connected it to a USB accessory in the past hour, you won't be able to communicate with the USB. So imagine a device that's been locked away for a while. Maybe your internet, you can't get onto the wireless directly, sorry, your internet connection requires tethering, but then suddenly you can't use the USB accessories because you've USB restricted modes enabled. So this might be something you consider disabling as well. Again, the modifying device name, so this can fight with other things. So you might be trying to set it one place but blocking it in another, so just be mindful of this. And next one's modifying wallpaper. Now, these have all been restrictions so far, but modifying wallpaper is an interesting one because you can allow it, but to set the wallpaper, it's actually under the mobile device groups. So you find your mobile device smart group, and then within there, there's an automated management tab, and you can set within here the icons. So you can have it as lock screen and home screen, or both. The image you want ongoing, so you can have it just once, or you can have it every day. So imagine if you're setting it every day, one of these, and someone's allowed to change it. You're then going to get a conflict where they'll change it, you'll overwrite it. So again, just think of that workflow. And if you want to set the lock screen and home screen to different images, you need to duplicate this smart group. So it looks on the device. It's quite nice. You can do some further customization with the lock screen profile payload. Here I've got a little emoji kind of doing a wave and hi there, JNUC21. JNUC21. And you can also use variables within this, so $email, etc. This will show at the bottom of the screen. So it's quite small there, but it can be quite a nice way of doing some customization and making it easily visible as to what the device is or who the device is assigned to. You can't set the aspect on this, or if that's the right name, but essentially, so you make your image works if it's horizontal or landscape. And this stuff still works as well if you're using shared iPad. Earlier on, said that you can't set bookmarks. You can use web clicks, and web clicks are on their own payload profile as well. You've got several options there. This is how it looks on a device. It essentially looks like an app. really, and click on the device. It's loading full screen as per the settings I'd set. You can have the address bar, etc. And then I've got a browsable web page. Now, one thing to bear in mind with these, this is a new thing that's kind of happened with shared iPad, etc. But you need to make sure that you've got the correct level stated within the profile for who you're deploying it to. So by that I mean, if you look at the profile payload for here, it says the level is user level. So we should now be able to push this out to devices in shared iPad mode. And the only other payload you got for this is single sign-on extension. If you change this to computer to device level, this won't work in shared iPad mode. It needs to be, that'll work in normal mode as such. One other thing that came about with iOS 14, iPadOS 14, was something called private Wi-Fi addresses. Essentially, every wireless network your device connects to, it creates its own MAC address for. And this is bespoke to that network. But the problem is here is those private Wi-Fi addresses aren't recorded via MDM, they're not within Jamf. So if you're using SkySea, ClearPass, etc., they won't be able to look back at the record via MAC address to see which device is actually authenticating in order to do their network access control. To mitigate this, you can use a profile to deploy down the SSID and check the box that says disable MAC address randomization. This needs iPadOS iOS 14 or greater to be deployed to. You can't deploy it on an older device in advance and hope the setting sticks. But this means for the SSID you're deploying, it's actually going to use the hardware SSID on the device as such, not the random one. Other things we have here as well, which are quite cool. We've got single app mode. Now, there's two versions of this. This one's autonomous single app mode. This allows an app to put itself into single app mode and remove itself from single app mode. Think teaching apps, think TestNav or Pearson, etc., those type of applications. And this is full on lockdown single app mode. Think of kiosk devices, etc. You deploy the app on the device, you deploy the payload profile here, and then you get to choose what is it you need to do or what options you want to make available to people. But updating a device when it's in this state, iOS or the application, there's a workflow that you need to look at. This for Jamf about the iOS updates, but you need to basically take the device out of single app mode, do the iOS update, and then bring the application back in single app mode. Which leads us on to remote commands. We only talk about a handful of these. So if an iOS device has a passcode enabled and you tell it to update iOS via the mash action, it will download the device but fail to install. Download the application update and fail to install. To ensure the update is installed, you must enter the passcode when they're prompted, or you remove the passcode first and then do the update. A bit of a caveat there, a bit of a warning on that one. If you look at the management commands of the record, these will actually be dynamic as well, based on how the devices are enrolled into Jamf, etc. And lost mode is one of the key features and things that people do love. So lost mode itself, you've got several options here: message, phone number, footnote, etc. You can always make sure it's always enforced, which means the device is powered off, powered back on, it's still in lock mode, and you can play a sound and also to help identify the device and where it is. And this is what it looks like. Someone's using the device, you get lost mode enabled on that device. Nothing can happen with the device right now, and it will make that noise. Once you've done that, if you refresh the page, the management command should say command sent, and then a few moments later, it gives you an option there about disabling device mode, lost mode, or updating the location within Jamf. To see location, you go into the inventory record of the device, look under security. There's a lost mode section in there. This is approximate location. I've taken some of the details out, but you would normally be able to click on that. It will load up maps with an approximate location. Here you can re-trigger the sound and you can re-update the location. If you disable lost mode on the device, there's no way of hiding this. The user is advised that basically the location of the device was sent to, again, your MDMs in the speech mark. So this isn't something to keep tabs on people. This is generally if the device is lost. Right, here we are. Got some little tips for you as well. So one thing in regards to what I've been showing here, some of the videos, etc., I just use QuickTime. And Apple have got KB on using QuickTime here to record the screen. This is also really handy to do either Zoom, TeamViewer, or whatever other things you're doing as well. So you can actually plug it into a Mac, show the screen via a remote session. Similarly, you can also do this with the console app. You plug in a device, and then on here you can actually read the logs as well. Okay, so with 45 seconds to go, my name's Ben Toms. That's been managing iPads for the Mac admin, and here's a link to all the documentation, etc., that I've linked throughout the talk itself. I hope you've enjoyed. I know it's been a bit of a whirlwind, a bit fast. Apologies. Please play back slower as needed. But thank you very much for attending the session. I hope it's been useful. And reach out if you want to speak to me further on this.